Hey, PewterCast fans. This is Ren Daxt coming at you with episode 14 of Training Camp Journals with Ren. As always, I just said, I'm your host, Ren Daxt, and this is going to be only two more shows left. Two more open practices for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are open to the public. Training camp has actually, quote-unquote, ended, and now this is, I guess, just getting ready for the season. I don't know what you really call it, but officially training camp has broken since, the Bucs don't move from where they used to play at the University of Tampa or when they used to play at the over in Disney, Wild World Sports Complex at Disney. This would be the time where they normally let everyone go home and get out of their dorms and, sleep at home, but still have the practices. But since it's been at $1 for a few years, it's really sort of hard to tell when a training camp officially ends, but it officially has, but it's the same thing. Practice are at the same time. The walkthroughs are at the same time, which they do at night, but as far as official training camp, it is over. I tweeted out earlier today that the crowd was a bit light. When we first started training camp, it probably would be anywhere from 200 to 500 people waiting outside the gate before it opened, and then another 1,000 would probably show up sometime after that. Today at 8 o'clock when they open the gates, there's probably 20 people in line. Maybe 50 cars total. No, not even close. A lot of people just kind of sat in their cars because the line wasn't too long, but very light crowd today. But it is the first day. Well, school's back in, I should say, for Hillsborough County, Pinellas County down here in the Bay Area, and it's a weekday, so it's understandable. Plus, if you wanted to go to training camp, you've probably already been there, and there's really not much else left up to the imagination as far as open positions and things like that, which are going on. Plus, once again, there's lots of installs today, special team stuff, lots of special teams practices. So as far as practices go, these are, once again, I want to say boring. I guess they're not quite as entertaining as the earlier practices, but still was a nice crowd. I would say when I went to the Jacksonville practice, there were still more fans that eventually showed up to this practice than there were at a Jacksonville practice. I just kind of want to get this off my chest. I've talked about the Midway or like the little carnival area where there's things to do for kids, and sometimes like Sprite is there, some new flavors, or the St. Pete Times is there, and like sign up, and the cheerleaders are there, and the Buccaneers stores there where you can buy your apparel and things like that. But there's a pirate ship, and usually it's manned by 98 Rock. That's the station that'll be covering Bucs games locally down here. You can't listen to it on internet radio. They are on iHeartRadio, but the Bucs games will not be broadcast on iHeartRadio. But locally, 98 Rock's doing it, and they usually man the ship, and they play music, and these guys up there, and they toss beads at you. I have not looked at these guys when I walk by there ever. Like, I've never made eye contact. Like, hey, throw me some beads. Every single time they throw beads at me. Like, I can hear them land behind me. I see them like land right in front of me. Today they hit me with beads. I know you remember me. I'm one of the only few people that actually wears pants. Not, that's something great, but everyone's in shorts. I never wear any Bucs gear whatsoever. So there's no jersey. I wear a hat with the brim pushed up, which is, I never seen anyone at practice wearing that. And I'm there every single day, and I never look, and they always throw. Today, they hit me. I'm giving them till tomorrow. If they do it again, there's going to be some sort of repercussions. I think I'm going to ask for beads. It's the same guys that run back and forth in front of the stands and wave the flag, and go, you say Tampa, they say Bay, and it goes back and forth, which is kind of fun. I find it a little bit annoying because I'm sort of there to watch practice a lot more than I am for the pageantry, and sometimes those flags are like right in the way and I can't see. They're doing 11-on-11 drills and I'll miss something, but boo-hoo, poor me. So I get that. But if they hit me tomorrow, I'm getting beads that last day, which would be Thursday. And when these guys run by with their flags, I'm pelting them with beads. That's what I'm doing. That's what I've decided. I kind of thought maybe like buying a demi grenade and throwing it at the ship, and no, they might frown on that. Water balloons, I'd probably get kicked out for that too. So this is what I've come up with, is like see how you like it type of deal. And they can't be looking, definitely they'll not be waiting for it. They'll not be looking. I know I'm being petty, but this is probably the 15th time? No, it can't be that many. Like 12th, 13th time that these guys have thrown beads at me, and it's the same people, and I know they know who I am. Well, actually, I don't know that, but I'm putting a stop to it, is what's going on. Not serious. I'm just being lighthearted about that whole thing, but definitely if I get pelted tomorrow, there's going to be some repercussions. First out today was the HardKnocks crew. The camera crews are out there early. Usually they sort of lag out behind. But first out player was Luke Stocker. And, tight ends are always out first. I just kind of report on this because it's, a way to sort of start off the show and get into the practices. Besides that, it's the usual cast of characters. Ryan Fitzpatrick came out, then Sifo, Lofau, then Jameis, and then, Kevin Pamphil was actually the second person out today. He'd been out the past two practices, so it was good to see him. He was doing some stretching work. It looked like he was really concentrating on the hamstring groin area in his early stretches, and did some light drills with George Warhop, before the actual blow of the blowhorn, and then they all sort of line up and stretch together and the music starts. But so that was good to see him out there. Also, Russell Hansbrough, who's sort of the fourth-string back most of last year. He's been in concussion protocol since the Cincinnati game. First time I saw him out on the practice field today. And yay, Brent Grimes came back. Talk about somebody who heals fast. I'm sure everyone's seen a picture of that laceration he had on his leg. He had like 20 stitches, and here it is. What is it? 10 days later. 13 days later, and he's already got I don't know if he's got all the stitches out, but he was back in pads, out there going. Had a wrap on his on the wound, but showed no ill effects of that whatsoever. He did not participate in the 7-on-7s or the 11-on-11s, but all the positional drills, like the cornerback drills and the cornerbacks on receivers, those things he participated in. But nothing really serious where he could sort of put that leg in danger type of deal. There was a signing. Probably a lot of you know the Buccaneers brought back Anthony DePaula, who has been the long snapper for the Buccaneers the past 3 years, which now puts him directly head-to-head with Garrison Sanborn, who has been the long snapper for the Bills the past 8 years. I don't really see why they're keeping two. Maybe they like DePaula, but they brought him in. They want to make sure that he can hold up to a practice or two. Make sure everything's fine with his knee because he blew out his ACL the last game of last year. Just to see how he does. But now we have the kicking competition, the NL kicking competitions, at least in Buccaneer fans' minds, has gone away, obviously, with the waiving of Roberto Aguayo. But now we have the long snapping competition. Two-man enter, may only one leave. So we'll see how that goes. I didn't really notice anything that, or heard a murmur or even a whisper about Garrison Sanborn not doing a good job. But there you go. There's a long snapping competition. And to make room for him, it's pretty sad news. The Bucs waived Jude Ajay-Barima. Hey, Jude. I always wanted to call him Jab, but that never caught on. So Jude Ajay-Barima, J-A-B. He injured his knee early in training camp. Might even have been OTAs. But I think it was early training camp, like the first week of training camp. And actually, if you follow him on Instagram, there was a pretty gnarly picture of his knee getting like unwrapped after surgery, and has a pretty nasty cut, or sutured, I should say, sutures like right across the top of the kneecap. And so they waived Jude. A lot of people on Twitter were talking about they should, maybe they should have put him on IR, or done that new thing that they started last year where you can put them on PUP, but designated for reassignment or to be able to bring back. I'm not really sure the verbiage of how that works, but I contest that like the difference between Javian Elliott, Robert McClain, and Jude is so small that you only get 2 of those designated for return, and to be able to use one on Jude when you have 2 other guys that are, it was going to be a real good battle between those 3 guys, and you could probably flip a coin as it now. So to use one of those returns on Jude, I don't think it really makes sense. But I would not be surprised at all, and I really think this will happen, is once his knee heals, I think they'll bring Jude back, even if it's just practice squad. So, but as of now, Jude Ajayi-Brima is a free agent. Some interesting things happened with the offensive line today. Pamfield came back, but Demir Dotson was still out, and Caleb Benenoch was still out, and today J.R. Sweezy was sitting out. Now, we have no idea about J.R. Sweezy. The Buccaneers have not put up, at least the time of this recording, had not put up Dirk Cutter's press conference on the website. So those questions about, what's wrong with Sweezy, how soon till Doc comes back and all that kind of stuff, and Benenoch, Dirk Cutter did say that he was not going to talk about those as freely as he'd done in the past, which I don't have a problem with. But if any information was, given out at all during that press conference, I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know exactly what Sweezy is. So we don't know if Sweezy tweaked something or it's just, maintenance, body recovery day. But so the starting offensive line ended up being Donovan Smith at left tackle, and then they brought in Evan Dietrich Smith at left guard. Allie was at center. Then they had Joe Hawley playing right guard, and they moved Kevin Pample from left guard all the way over to right tackle. So sort of that move where we've kind of been speculating if Dot or Donovan Smith go down, who's the next tackle up? That sort of happened today. That move happened today where Kevin Pamphile, moved his guard spot and went out to right tackle, and then Evan Smith came in at his left guard spot. But Joe Hawley playing guard is something that I've never seen, in his 2+ years that he's been here. And it's always sort of been a center, and that's it. That was kind of like the one of the reasons why, Evan Smith, I got to call him Dietrich, he dropped it. Evan Smith have sort of been hanging around because he could play, both guard spots and center. I think the real reason, and we won't know, but I think the reason that Hawley was actually starting at guard today is because Benenoch is out. So Benenoch actually was the third guard last year. If you remember, Pamphile was out for a game or two, and they brought in Evan Smith, and then he hurt himself like in the first series against the Chiefs game, and then Benenoch came in. So if Benenoch was healthy, it'd be interesting to see who started that right guard spot today. Would it have been Hawley or would it have been Benenoch? But it was good to see that Joe Hawley's getting a little versatility. They love him in the clubhouse as a leader. I really don't think he's in danger of not making the team. But of course, as I said on previous podcasts, and as a lot of you know, the more versatile you can make yourself, the better it is, better chance you have of making the team. And if you're not going to start, then the more things you can do, the more reasons they have to keep you around. Quan Alexander was out today. It was reported that Sunday it looked like he tweaked something near the end of practice. They asked him about it. He laughed it off like, oh, no, it's nothing. But he wasn't in there today, which, could mean something, could mean nothing. Once again, I didn't get to see Dirk Cutter's press conference, and they didn't talk to Quan today that I saw. So he looked fine. He was walking around fine. He wasn't on crutches. He didn't have any sort of like brace or anything on his knee, and he wasn't walking gingerly at all. So I think everything's going to be fine there. One thing that I saw, and I didn't see anybody else report on, is Mike Evans left early. I just happened to look up, and I saw him just walking back towards the facility, back towards, One Buck Place, and he had a trainer with him. But he looked like he was in zero discomfort. It could have been something as simple as he was going to go back in there to maybe loss of contact, or he got poked in the eye, or maybe he wanted to retape something. It looked like that simple, but I kept checking and I never saw him come back out. Once again, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I did see it, so I'm just letting you know what I saw. I didn't see anybody else report on it. But I definitely didn't see him come back to practice. And once again, I'm sorry I keep repeating myself, but I didn't see Dirk Cutter's press conference. So I don't know if, somebody asked him about that, and, he might have told, it's just a poke in the eye. And I checked, the Twitter feed of the main guys, and no one seemed to have brought that up during, with the recapping what Cutter said during his press conference. So, I'm pretty sure I saw it. At this point, it's starting to set in that maybe I managed it. I didn't. It really happened, and he was out for the rest of practice. Something interesting that came out of that, though, to me, it looked like the next man up when they put the starters like a 3-wide receiver set, which would be one tight end, so it would be Brait, Hump, Jackson, and the next guy up seemed to be Reedy. It was really hard to get a read on who was the 5th wide receiver, at least in rotation between like Reedy, Huff, and Martino. Walker and Bobo Wilson seem to be a little bit further behind, even though I don't see them drop the ball at all. Maybe it's just an experience thing and still learning the offense. But Reedy seemed to be the guy who was stepping up next. So if today has anything to do with who's going to be the 5th wide receiver, it looked like it was going to be Reedy. And the last thing I'll say about that is Doug Martin also ran with the ones today, and ran with the ones a lot. Jacquizz Rodgers did get a lot of time with the ones, but it seemed that once the first teamers come out, it was Doug Martin like every time. So they don't seem to be scaling back his workload in practice as they ramp up closer to Miami, where we know Doug's not going to be there for that game or the 2 following games after that. Once again today, it was a heavy special teams install, tryouts, practice. They practice kickoff, they practice kickoff return, they practice punt, they practice punt return, they practice field goals. They actually threw in a fake punt there at one point, and Brian Unger actually threw a pretty nice pass out there to Ryan Smith. What I could take out, and once again, you've heard me complain about the numbers and how I can't tell a 6 from an 8 from a 7 from a 5 because the digital and there's no curves in anything. Also, the players tuck them up, tuck their shirts, tuck their jerseys underneath their shoulder pads to stay a little cooler. So it's difficult to sort of get some of these numbers, and a lot of the body shapes, especially on special teams, are sort of the same. If I'm looking at the cornerbacks, I can tell Hargraves from Grimes from Ryan Smith. I can do that now. But when they're all sort of like lined up in a row doing kickoff coverage, like kicking the ball off and covering it without like a position like cornerback, or are they standing in the safety spot, or are they standing in the wide receiver spot, it gets a little more confusing about who's who. But it was sort of the guys you would expect going to make the team. Like Javian Elliott was out there covering kickoffs of the ones, Beckwith, Wilcox, things like that. But 2 guys that I thought that I saw, and there was a few guys I could not see, that I found interesting, that are guys I thought were on the bubble, but at least for today were on the number 1 kickoff coverage. One was Alan Cross. If you would ask me if Alan Cross was going to make this team this year at the beginning of training camp, I would have probably said, he's the first guy cut. being Howard, Brait, Stocker, and then sort of I thought maybe Westbrook or Auclair would have beat Cross out just because their size and athletic ability. But as I mentioned earlier, Cross gets open, he gets separation, he catches the ball, he just makes plays. And seeing him on first team kickoff coverage sort of solidified that that feeling that he seems to be doing a lot better than I thought he was going to, at least coming into camp. That means absolutely nothing. Once again, it's not really hard to be replaced on a kickoff coverage team or a return team or any of these teams. But to see him out there, it's a good sign for him. Also, I saw Ryan Russell out there. I know Dirk Carter has said things like when Jack Smith, the defensive end, went out with that, didn't come back, I should say, with his ACL injury and had to do another procedure. And it seemed that Ryan Russell was subbing in for sort of the obvious passing down situations, playing opposite Noah Spence. But they do a lot of rotation, so it's sort of hard to catch him in there at the right times. And George Johnson seems to be getting more reps now. Things of that nature, but to see Ryan Russell on the first team coverage, kickoff coverage team, sort of makes you feel and think, at least lean that way, that he's he's in a good spot right now to make the defensive line rotation. Also, somebody who hasn't got a lot of publicity, a lot of pub, or a lot of playing time is the 7th round pick, Stevie Tuikolevatu. But he was actually the starting left guard on field goals. He was the only red jersey in there. Everybody along the line that was blocking on field goal attempts was all white jerseys. So obviously a bunch of offensive linemen, probably the tight ends, some tight ends on the end, big guys. But Stevie T was playing, left guard, which was, if you're a Stevie T fan and wondering where he is and his chances to make the team, I've also been wondering that. You hear other people say that they're pleased with him, he's doing fine, but as you say that he's not really climbing up the depth chart or getting more playing time, or he doesn't really flash in practice or plays like that. Granted, he's not really a flash type of player. But like I said, it was good to see him out there where he was blocking field goals with the first team. Blocking 4 field goals with the first team. And good news, Nick Folk looked great today. Went 4 for 4 at the skinny post. And the last one was a 52-yarder. It started like at 32 yards, and then he moved back. And the last one he nailed was a 52-yarder. And like I said, it was those skinny posts. Like those skinny posts, just to sort of give you an idea, they are probably not much wider, or they might be the same exact width as Arena Football League posts. So they're skinny. They're probably only about 10 yards wide. So he had a really good day. The 5th wide receiver spot, I sort of ruined this segment already by telling you about how Reedy seemed to be the next man up. He had a good day. I mean, he did. I don't really notice him any more than Bobo Wilson or Walker, out of Texas A&M that came from the Canadian League. I think those guys sort of catch the ball a lot, but the later two, Wilson and Walker, don't really get that many opportunities, especially on 11-on-11s, 7-on-7s, things like that. You just don't really see him as much out there. But Reedy hasn't dropped a pass for a couple of days. Huff dropped a pass like at the beginning of practice, and then he got one. Then he caught a nice pass, and then it got stripped. Martino had a drop, sometime during practice. He also had like a double catch when no one was covering type of thing. So those guys' hands are still suspect to me, but I will still say that they are feeding Huff the ball more than anybody else. Like they are giving that kid enough rope to either make the team or hang himself with it. It's going. It's funny. I was talking to Derek Fournier from What the Buck. He was sitting in front of me, and he said he was to the point. He's sort of on my side of the fence about Huff, where love his size, love his speed, love his athletic ability. The only problem is just can't catch, and you're going to have to do that being a wide receiver. He said something like they're they keep feeding him the ball because they want to prove themselves right, sort of thing, which they haven't as an organization, especially after the Aguayo cut, isn't something you see them do a lot, where they sort of just back this guy because they want this guy to get it. But it's hard to argue that they're not feeding him the ball, getting him as many looks as possible. A few other things here. The QBs look sharp today. Ryan Fitzpatrick probably had his best couple of practices the last couple since after the Jacksonville game. This is the best he's looked all training camp. He looked good. Blue Fowl, he looks good. As far as the third string / fourth string quarterback / camp arm. And Jameis looked good. And Jameis's deep ball is looking better and better, especially since that Jacksonville game. You saw him throw that really nice pass to Mike Evans, who sort of short-armed it. Some people say he got lost in the lights. Some people say he just dropped it or misjudged it. Whatever happened, it was like a 52-yard throw in the air, and Jameis put it right on the money. And you've noticed that he's doing noticeably better in sort of the 9 routes, the fly routes, where they're just practicing those with no defensive back, but they're just running routes that are laying it out there. And Jameis would noticeably be short all the time. The guy would catch it. It was sort of that thing where put it in that 5-yard window. You got to let him give him a chance to catch the ball. Don't throw it out of bounds. Don't overthrow him. But it looks like his timing with these guys are matching up a lot better, because he keeps throwing to the same guys. That rotation thing goes. Like if Mike Evans is first up in drills, if Jameis throws first, and then Fitzpatrick throws, and Cepho throws, and then the fourth receiver would be like Deshaun Jackson, so Jameis can throw to Deshaun Jackson, and then usually the guy after that would be Humphreys that Jameis would throw to. And they do the same thing when they're running tight end drills. Jameis always throws to Cameron Brate. Jameis always throws to O.J. Howard. But now that there's he always gets he's getting more throws of different receivers, namely like the Walkers and the Martinos and the Bobo Wilsons. I'm talking about Jameis, and he's hitting these guys in stride 2 on deep passes. So it looks to the naked eye that his deep ball is improving, and I'm sure you've heard how he's up about 10% from last year training camp and up to this point as far as completion percentage. He's up about 10%, which is a huge jump. And you've seen him get fast starts in the first 2 games, so he seems to be doing well with that. And finally, at least for this section, Deshaun Jackson was nearly uncoverable today. I don't know if people were gassed or just didn't feel like trying to keep up with him, but there was quite a few plays where he was like a step and a half, 2 steps by the defender, and no matter who was throwing the ball, sometimes it was Fitzpatrick, sometimes it was Jameis. He just run under it, and it looks like he was like just going half speed. So it looks like the chemistry with Deshaun Jackson, the quarterbacks, is coming along great. Couple of things I want to talk about. They did a drill I've never seen before. This isn't breaking news, but what they did was sort of like a 3-on-5. It started like it looked like a 7-on-7. No offensive line, no defensive line, but they'd only put a receiver, tight end, and a running back, and they just run the routes to one side of the field, either the left side of the field or the right side of the field. So sort of like the far corner and the far safety weren't in on the drill. It'd be like those 3 guys, those 3 receivers, running back, tight end, and wide receiver going up against, just that half of the 5. So it'd be like 2 linebackers, a corner, a nickel, and a safety. And they were scoring pretty easy. It was all inside the red zone stuff. It was sort of like short passes and short seam routes to the tight end. Westbrook had a real nice catch in there where Jameis zipped one in. Like I said, the quarterbacks looked sharp today, and so did the receivers. Like the only person who seemed to drop the ball was Huff and Martino. I don't remember any other drops at all during any of the drills today. So, like I said, that chemistry seems to be coming along pretty cool. But I've never seen that sort of that 3-on-5 drill. There were 7 guys in the field, but only really 5 of them were, playing defense. And I just thought I'd mention it. Glanton, since Quan was out and Beckwith is now playing full-time Sam because of the injury to Bond, Glanton was playing backup Mike. I guess he was starting Mike linebacker today. And, he looked good. Like, you didn't really miss Quan Alexander today as far as, like, hard hitting or guys being, wide open. You just didn't really miss Quan's athleticism. Now they don't tackle to the ground still in camp, so I don't know if they're even ever going to all year, to be honest. But it wasn't noticeable that Quan's there. In no way am I saying that Darius Glanton is going to replace Quan Alexander, obviously, but it wasn't that big of a drop-off, at least to the naked eye. It took me probably about half of practice to realize. I knew Quan wasn't in there, but it took me about half practice to realize, like, oh, Glanton's in there, because there wasn't like this huge drop-off in play that sort of stuck out like a sore thumb. After practice, sort of what always happens, the quarterbacks and the tight ends got together, but it wasn't sort of the conglomerate of everybody. Winston was out there. No Ryan Fitzpatrick, no Cepho, and it was just Brayton Howard. It was just those 3 guys, for about 5 minutes throwing the ball around, run routes and little red zone routes. And then Alan Cross came over later. He showed up. Jaquiz Rogers and McWeapon, Jeremy McNichols were practicing receiving. They ran a couple of routes, and one of the assistants would throw them the ball, and they did that over and over and over. I would probably say they caught anywhere between 30 and 50 balls apiece, a live throw, not the jugs machine. After practice today, and Hump was out there having another assistant were throwing him passes, but he wasn't really running routes. He was just sort of, you've probably seen in videos where they're simulating their running with their arms go up and down, and they just catch the ball and they toss it, back to the guy who's throwing it to him. Hump was out there for about 10 minutes doing that. And then those jug machines were busy today. Once again, I think they had 2 of them going today. Once again, it was so far over there, it was sort of hard to tell. I'm pretty sure I saw Peyton Barber over there, and I think I saw a video once I got home and I was looking for the Dirk Cutter interview. I think I saw a video of Martino after practice hitting the jugs machine. So Martino, Huff, and Reedy, those guys need to be over there all the time, especially Martino and Huff. But, it's getting down to cut time, and these guys are sort of feeling the pressure. And if you think you're on the bubble, I don't want to say it's too little too late, but at least you're showing people that effort that, that you're trying to get better. Not only, you're not just doing the least amount possible. And finally, Jameis Winston came over and signed to the general population side of the field. I haven't seen him do that all training camp. He might have come over the first day, but normally he stays over to the suite area, the VIP section I tell you about with all the free food and drink. He stays over there. That's usually where he signs. I'm sure he stays over there. That's usually where he signs. Normally because if he comes to the general admission section, there's 2,000 people, there's 2,500 people, and they're all going to want something from Jameis. Like I said today, there's probably just 1,000. And he didn't come over for a good probably 10, 15 minutes after practice ended, so a lot of people had left. But of course, everyone else that was still there ran over. So as I was leaving, Jameis was still signing, but I was walking out while Jameis was sort of walking up to start signing. But it was cool to see that he actually went over there and signed some general mission things because he rarely does that. And finally, I want to give a shout out to Todd Taylor, Todd M. Taylor. At Todd M. Taylor on Twitter. He's a Buccaneers fan from Colorado. He has written an email to the PewterCast he listens to PewterCast. He listens to Ren's Journal, this pod. And he let me know that he was flying in from Colorado from Bucs practice and he wanted to meet up and talk some Bucs football. And we did. It was near the end. But this guy flew in from Colorado, watch a practice, and then he's flying back tonight. His parents live down here, so he's going to spend a few hours with them. He's also going to go to the local stores and sort of pick up a bunch of Bucs apparel because you can't find it in Colorado. Obviously that's Denver Bronco country. So I've sort of, he goes, yeah, I'm from Pennsylvania. And then, I'm a big Penn State fan because we were talking about, I don't remember who we were discussing, but we were discussing different players. And he's like, I like to follow my Penn State guys, where it was, Chris Godwin and Donovan Smith. And apparently Chris Baker, Swaggy, used to go to Penn State before he went to Hampton, I think he's from. He got kicked out of Penn State. Sort of like Noah Spencer. Oh, I shouldn't say that because I don't know why he got kicked out. I shouldn't say sort of like Noah Spencer because we all know Noah Spencer got kicked out for failing drug tests. So I don't know why Chris Baker left Penn State. Todd actually said he got kicked out. I shouldn't say kicked out because I haven't looked it up. But, even if Todd was incorrect on sort of that classification, I'm sure he didn't mean anything by it. The point is that Baker used to go to Penn State and is now in the NFL, so he sort of follows his guys. But it was just funny. It's like I sort of asked him, like, well, how do you become a Buccaneers fan? If like he said, like his whole family's from Penn State, and it was a pretty cool story. His mom grew up in the Pennsylvania area, and the only people sort of in his nuclear family that didn't live in the Pennsylvania area was like an aunt and uncle on his mother's side, or I guess his mother's aunt and uncle that lived down in the Tampa area, and so she got accepted to USF, came down here, lived with them, sort of having a free place to stay for all 4 years of her college. She graduated, went back up to Pennsylvania, met a guy, fell in love, got married, and then they sort of they've been in Pennsylvania their whole life, and they're sort of like looked up and said, I hate Pennsylvania winters. Like, let's move down, to your aunt and uncle's spot down there in Tampa Bay area. So they did, and that's sort of where, Todd grew up. He was already born. He was born in Pennsylvania, but so he came down here, but right when you start to get into football, like 5, 6, 7 around there, he was a Bucs fan. He said they had season tickets from like 76 to 84. So he's an old Bucco Bruce fan, and now he lives out in Colorado because he got married, and his wife, had a great job offer, so he moved out to California, and he works for Southwest Airlines. That's how Don't think this guy dropped like $400 on a round trip ticket. He gets to fly for free, but still the commitment's there. Let's face it. Flying is exhausting. It can take a lot out of you, even though you just sit there, which I never understand. But it always takes a lot out of me. Yeah, so that's how a guy from Colorado is, sort of a lifelong Bucs fan. You could, like I said, you can follow him on Twitter at Todd M. Taylor. We sat and chatted, and it was a good talk. We talked Buccaneers football. I got a little history about, how he became a fan, and he told a cool story about how last year he was at training camp, and Russell Shepard sort of came over, was signing autographs, and just like happened to pick his daughter out of the crowd. Was like, "Hey, come play catch with me," and she was like, "Okay." And so he got to tell that story where his daughter got to go out in the field after practice and throw the ball around with Todd Monken and Russell Shepard and her. So it was a good time. Well, that will do it, folks. Thanks for listening. This podcast falls under the family of the PewterCast, family of podcast. I will be back tomorrow. I'm sort of pushing the limit on my time here as far as what I can send to Brent through an email. So I'm going to make this very quick. Follow me at Ren Daxt, RenDaxt. I'm always down to talk Buccaneers football, and I will see you tomorrow. Only 2 more episodes left. This has been episode 14. Thanks. Bye. Go Bucs.